The Ades Okafor had been folding napkins at the Mensa household for 11 years, 3 months and 4 days, when she arrived on a Monday morning to find the iron gate locked and a note taped to the post. The note was written on the back of a grocery receipt. It said, "Services no longer required. Please do not return." There was no envelope. There was no name signed at the bottom. There was no amount owed for the previous 2 weeks of work. She stood on the pavement outside 14 Bordelon Road in Lagos at 7:09 a.m., with her canvas bag pressed to her side, and read the note twice. Then she folded it carefully along its original crease and placed it inside the front pocket of the bag, next to a small tin of shea butter and the bus card she recharged every Sunday night for 800 naira. She did not knock. She turned around and walked back to the bus stop on the corner. Nobody in that house knew what they had just let go, but one person outside of it had been watching long enough to know exactly what would happen next. Adezine Ngozi Okafor was 47 years old and weighed 54 kilograms, which was 4 kilograms less than she had weighed when she started working at that house. She was not sick. She had simply stopped eating lunch every day for 2.5 years so that her daughter could stay in the secondary school on a Papa road that charged 42,000 naira per term. She ate breakfast before she left her one-room apartment in Surulere. She ate dinner when she came home, and in between she drank water and kept moving. Nobody at 14 Bordelon Road had ever asked why she never sat down to eat during her break. She had been born in Enugu in 1978, the second of 4 children, and she carried her mother's name, Nogo, as her middle name, the way a person carries a torch in both hands, carefully, so it does not go out. Her mother had died in 2019 from a blood pressure condition that could have been managed with medication that cost 1,800 naira a month if there had been 1,800 naira a month to spare. Ades had sent what she could, which was never enough, and she had learned to live with the specific weight of that particular insufficiency. She wore a green Ankara blouse on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. She owned 2 work blouses, the green one and a blue one with small white flowers along the collar, and she rotated them because there was no point in wasting the good ones. She washed them by hand each evening in the communal bathroom of her building and hung them inside her room on a wire she had strung between the 2 nails above the window. By morning, they were dry. They were always clean. The women on her floor had noticed this without commenting on it, the way people notice things they quietly admire. She kept a small notebook in the left pocket of her work bag, not a diary, a record. Every week she wrote down what she had spent and what she had earned and the difference between the two. She had done this for 6 years, since the month she realized that she could not remember what she had done with the previous month's salary. The notebook cost 150 naira at the stationery shop on Ojuelegba Road, and she replaced it every 4 months. She was on her 22nd notebook. The one skill she had never told the Mensa family about was the thing she had been doing every Sunday afternoon for 3 years. She had been taking classes in bookkeeping at a small business center near her building. The instructor was a retired accountant named Mr. Festus Enendu, who charged 500 naira per session for adult learners and sometimes waived the fee when he could see the person had shown up in the rain. Ades had never missed a Sunday, not once. She had her certificate, printed on plain paper, signed by Mr. Festus, in the notebook, folded between the last page and the back cover. She had never shown it to anyone. In the Mensa house, she had cooked and cleaned and pressed shirts, and organized pantries, and remembered birthdays and laundered tablecloths and prepared Christmas meals for 22 people. She had done these things every weekday and some Saturdays for 11 years. She had been paid 35,000 naira per month for the first 7 years, and then 38,000 for the last 4. A raise that Chief Raymond Mensa had announced at the kitchen table one morning as though he were granting her the continent. His wife, Mrs. Folake Mensa, had said, "That's good," without looking up from her phone. Their daughter Temi had not been present. Their son Biadun had been upstairs in his room, with the door closed, the way he kept it for most of the decade Ades had worked in that house. She had cooked jollof rice for their parties, the kind that turned golden at the bottom of the pot with the smoky crust everyone fought over. She had cooked pepper soup for Mrs. Folake's mother when she visited from Ibadan and could not eat anything spicy but would not say so because it seemed like a complaint. Aziz had figured this out by the 3rd visit and began making a mild version without being asked, setting it at the old woman's place without drawing attention to the substitution. The old woman had squeezed her hand once when leaving. She had never said why. She had cooked birthday cakes for Temmie's birthday every year from age 11 to age 22, which was the last birthday before Temmie moved to London. She had cooked a meal for Biodun's wedding rehearsal in 2021, working from 4:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. alone in that kitchen, and nobody had thought to send food back to the kitchen for her. She had eaten a piece of bread standing at the counter at 2 p.m. and kept working. She had never been thanked. Not once in 11 years had anyone in that house said the two words. The morning she found the note, a woman named Mama Comfort was sitting on a low stool outside the provision shop on the corner, the one that opened at 6:30 and sold cold water and crackers and paracetamol. Mama Comfort was 63 years old and ran the shop and had lived on that corner for 27 years. She had seen 3 families come and go from 14 Bordelin Road, and she had seen every person who worked inside it. She had watched Adayes pass her corner 2,860 mornings over 11 years. She knew exactly what time Adayes arrived, what she wore, and how she walked. She also knew something that Adayes did not, because Mama Comfort knew things the way certain people do, quietly, by watching, by remembering, by being so much furniture to the people around her that they spoke freely in her presence. She saw Adayes come back toward the bus stop with the folded receipt in her bag, and the same expression she wore every morning, which was the expression of a person who has decided not to spend energy on anything she cannot change. Mama Comfort said, "They let you go?" Adayes said, "Come and sit." Adayes sat on the small wooden bench beside the stool, and Mama Comfort brought her a cold sachet of water, the kind that cost 10 naira, and placed it in her hand without asking if she wanted it. They sat together for 4 minutes. Then Mama Comfort said something that sounded like a casual observation but was not. She said, "You know who else they let go last month? Their accountant, the one who handled the business side for Chief Raymond. He found something wrong in the numbers and they let him go the same day he mentioned it." She looked at the pavement. "Now I hear they have a tax problem, something from 2019. The man from the Revenue Service has come to that gate twice." Adayes did not respond immediately. She pressed the sachet of water against the inside of her wrist, which was warm from the morning sun. She thought about what Mr. Festus had told her last month, which was that she had passed her level 2 assessment and that if she wanted to take the practical examination in October, he believed she would pass that too. She took out her notebook and wrote down the date and the information and the word October. If this story is doing to you what I think it is, subscribe now, because what happens next is something that Adayes herself did not see coming until the morning a stranger called her by her full name. The following weeks were not easy. She had 19,400 naira saved, which was what was left after she had paid the July term fees for her daughter Ngozi Jr., who was 15 and studying at the school on Apapa Road, and who did not know how much the term cost because Adayes had decided her daughter should not grow up measuring her own worth against a number. She had 3 weeks before August rent. She cleaned 2 other houses in her neighborhood for cash, a total of 8,000 naira for the month. And she did not tell anyone she was doing it because there was no one to tell and because it was not information that changed anything. She was not ashamed. She was calculating. She went to see Mr. Festus on the Sunday after she was let go. She sat down at his table in the back room of the business center, which smelled of chalk dust and stale tea and the particular smell of books that had been opened and consulted many times, and she told him what had happened. He listened. He poured tea from a flask. He said, "You told me about a hotel chain in Victoria Island that had advertised for a part-time accounts clerk last year. Do you remember?" She remembered. She had seen the advertisement pinned to the notice board at the business center, and she had taken a photograph of it on her phone, and then not called the number because she had still been employed. Mr. Festus said, "Call the number." She said, "Call it anyway." The number belonged to a woman named Mrs. Patricia Oyedele, who was the finance manager of the Crestwood Suites on Amadou Bello Way in Victoria Island. Mrs. Patricia answered on the 3rd ring and sounded like a person who did not have time but was choosing to give some of it anyway. Adayes introduced herself and stated clearly that she had completed a level 2 bookkeeping certification and was looking for part-time accounts work. There was a pause. Mrs. Patricia said the position had been filled. Then she said, "Can you come in on Thursday at 10 a.m. anyway? We have an issue I could use a second set of hands on." Adaze wrote Thursday and 10 a.m. in her notebook and arrived at the hotel at 9:47 a.m. in the blue blouse with the white flowers along the collar, which she had pressed that morning with the iron she borrowed from the woman 2 doors down. She sat in the chair across from Mrs. Patricia's desk and answered every question with her own small notebook open in front of her, so she could reference figures accurately. When Mrs. Patricia showed her the ledger with the reconciliation discrepancy that had been sitting unresolved for 3 months, Adaze did not pretend to understand immediately. She asked for 15 minutes with the pages. Mrs. Patricia stepped out. Adaze sat with the ledger and her pencil and found the error, a duplication across 2 payment cycles that had compounded into a 214,000 naira discrepancy in 11 minutes. Mrs. Patricia came back in. She looked at what Adaze had circled and where she had written the correction. She sat down slowly. She said, "How long did you say you've been doing this?" Adaze told her about the Sunday classes, the 22 notebooks, Mr. Festus. Mrs. Patricia nodded once, the kind of nod that is really a decision being made. She said, "I can offer you full-time. The salary is 95,000 per month with a 6-month review." Adaze pressed her feet flat against the floor. She looked at the woman across the desk. She said, "I'll start Monday." This is the part of the story where the Mensah household began to understand what it had let go. It began with the taxman's third visit to 14 Bordillion Road, which happened on a Wednesday morning 6 weeks after Adaze had found the note on the gate. The official who arrived was from the Federal Inland Revenue Service, and he had documents that referred to a discrepancy in 2019 and 2020 payroll records. Chief Raymond Mensah had a lawyer, but the lawyer was a property lawyer and did not understand financial records the way the situation now required. The accountant, who had been let go in June, had told Chief Raymond what the problem was, and Chief Raymond had told him to get out of his office. Now the problem had a 4.7 million naira penalty attached to it and a 60-day resolution window. Chief Raymond called the accountant. The accountant had already accepted a position elsewhere. He called 2 other firms and got quotes that started at 800,000 naira. He came home on a Friday evening and sat in the kitchen without having asked anyone to prepare food, which was the first time Adaze's absence became physically obvious to the household. Because nobody was in that kitchen and nothing was ready, and Mrs. Folake had not thought to arrange a replacement because she had thought the arrangement of such things had been happening automatically, the way lights come on when a switch is flipped, without considering that someone had been flipping the switch every day for 11 years. Mrs. Folake called a woman she knew to ask for a referral to a good domestic worker. The woman gave her 2 numbers. The first person she called wanted 55,000 naira per month and could not start for 3 weeks. The second person she called turned out to cook only northern Nigerian food, and the family ate predominantly Yoruba and Igbo dishes. Mrs. Folake sat in the kitchen for a moment and thought about the jollof rice. She thought about how it had always been on the table when it was supposed to be there. She thought about the mild pepper soup that her mother always asked for, by its absence, by saying, "I'll just have whatever you're serving." No need for anything special, which had always meant the mild version was already there. She did not call Adaze. Chief Raymond did not call Adaze. Their son Biodun, who had been home for a visit that month from Abuja, called Mama Comfort from the corner shop because he had her number from when he used to send her to buy things as a child. He asked Mama Comfort if she knew how to reach the woman who used to cook for them. Mama Comfort said she did. She did not give him the number immediately. She said, "What do you want to reach her for?" He told her about his father's tax situation and said they needed help with records. Mama Comfort was quiet. She said, "She is not a cook anymore." Biodun said, "What?" Mama Comfort said, "She is an accounts clerk at the Crestwood Suites on Amadou Bello Way. You can try to reach her there. I don't know if she will come." The silence that followed lasted long enough that Mama Comfort thought the call had dropped. Biodun Mensah drove to the Crestwood Suites on a Tuesday morning and asked at the front desk for Mrs. Okafor in the finance department. The receptionist, a young woman in a cream blazer, said, "One moment," and called up. Biodun stood in the marble-floored lobby with his car keys in his hand and the feeling of a man who has arrived somewhere expecting a familiar room and found an entirely different building. 5 minutes later, Adaze came down in a charcoal gray blouse and flat shoes, with a lanyard around her neck that said, "Crestwood Suits." Finance, and she looked at him the same way she had always looked at him. which was directly and without performance of any kind. He said, "A days." She said, "Good morning, bio done?" He said, "Can we talk?" She said, "I have 30 minutes, come." She took him to the small meeting room off the lobby that Mrs. Patricia allowed her to use when she met outside clients, which she had begun doing occasionally for families with small business accounting problems, charging 15,000 naira per session. She sat across the table and opened her notebook. She let him explain the situation. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she said, "Send me the records for 2018 through 2021. All of them, the payroll files, the tax submissions, the bank statements." He said, "My father doesn't know I'm here." She looked at him. She said, "I know." She took 3 weeks with the records. She found not one problem, but 3, 2 of which had been there long before the one the official had flagged. She wrote up a full remediation report, 11 pages organized by year, with each discrepancy itemized, and the correction path mapped out beside it. She submitted it to the fire's case officer directly, because Mrs. Patricia had connected her with a tax compliance specialist named Mr. Adewale Biobaku, who knew the right channels and whose name at the revenue office carried weight. The penalty was reduced from 4.7 million naira to 800,000 naira on the basis of voluntary disclosure and cooperation. Chief Raymond Mensa paid it in full in September. He never called a days. He never came to see her. He sent Biodun with an envelope containing 150,000 naira in cash. Biodun came to the hotel and handed her the envelope in the lobby. She held it for a moment. She took out 50,000 naira and handed it back to Biodun. She said, "Tell him that's my rate for 3 weeks of work. He already knows what the rest was owed." Biodun looked at the money in her hand and then at her face. He said nothing. He took the money back. He drove home. Mrs. Folake Mensa heard all of this from Biodun and sat with it for 2 days. On the 3rd day, she drove herself to the hotel, not her driver, herself, and asked at the front desk for Mrs. Okafor. She waited 12 minutes in the lobby. When Adez came down, she was carrying a file folder and had her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. Mrs. Folake said, "I want to speak with you." Adez said, "All right." They sat in the same meeting room. Mrs. Folake said, "I don't know if I ever said thank you." Adez did not say anything. Mrs. Folake said, "I don't think I did." Adez looked at her. She said, "No, you didn't." Mrs. Folake looked at the table. She said, "The mild pepper soup, the one you always made for my mother." She stopped. Adez waited. Mrs. Folake said, "She called me last week. She asked if you were still with us. When I told her no, she cried. She actually cried. She said you were the only person who had ever noticed without being told." She looked up. "I didn't know that. I didn't notice any of it." Aziz pressed both hands flat on the table in front of her. She said, "I know you didn't." She was not unkind when she said it. She was simply accurate. What Adez Ngozi Okafor carried out of 14 Bourdion Road on that Monday morning at 7:09 a.m. was not a grievance. She carried 11 years of practice in precision, practice in invisibility, practice in the discipline of doing something carefully even when no one is watching it being done. She carried her 22 notebooks. She carried her certificate from Mr. Festus, folded between the last page and the back cover. She carried the knowledge that she had fed a household through illness and celebration and ordinary Tuesday evenings, and that she had never once been told she was seen. And she carried that knowledge out of the gate and down the road and onto the bus and all the way to her life, which had been waiting for her to arrive. The people who let her go thought they were releasing her. They were releasing themselves. There is a kind of worth that does not need to be announced. It moves quietly. It shows up on time. It solves the problem that has been sitting on the desk for 3 months while everyone else looked away. It knows exactly what the mistake is before anyone finishes explaining it. The world has a habit of overlooking this kind of worth, of standing in the presence of it every single day and calling it by a lesser name, or calling it nothing at all. Until the morning it is not there and the kitchen is empty and the food is not ready and the tax office is at the gate. You cannot take from a person what they have built inside themselves. You can change the locks, you can tape a note to the gate, you can go 11 years without saying 2 words, but the skill stays. The habit stays. The knowledge of exactly how much she is worth stays written down in notebook number 23 in her left pocket, available whenever the next person asks. By October, Adaze had passed her practical examination. Mr. Festus printed the certificate himself and added a handwritten note at the bottom in red ink that said, "I told you so." She folded it the same way she folded everything, carefully along a clean crease, and placed it with the others. She was already looking at the Level 3 syllabus. Her daughter, Ngozi Jr., had made honor roll. They celebrated with jollof rice and fried plantain on a Sunday evening, the two of them at the small table in the apartment in Surulere, and the bottom of the pot came out golden with the crust they both knew how to find. No one needed to tell them what it meant. They knew. The Mensah family hired a new cook in September. By November, she had left. They hired another of them stayed long. Chief Raymond Mensah thought he had let go of a convenience. What he had let go of was the architecture of his household, quiet and precise, and built every morning before anyone in that house had opened their eyes. He understood this eventually. He understood it the way people understand certain things. Not all at once, but in pieces, in the quiet of an empty kitchen, in the particular absence of something that was never named while it was present. Some things are only visible when they are gone. If you have ever been the person in the room doing the work that nobody named, the work that simply appeared because you had arrived, leave your answer in the comments. I want to know, if someone let you go on a Monday morning and taped a note to the gate, what would you walk toward? What would already be in your bag? Leave it below. I really want to read it. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.